3 different men, the same issue. Am I unfairly holding my ex-fiancée's past against her? My ex-fiancée, 32F, and I, 28F, are both bisexual women and were together for 9 years. We broke up in February, got back together at the end of May, and recently broke up again for reasons much bigger than this situation. I'm fully moved out now. I'm posting because I genuinely want outside perspectives on one specific situation involving a guy I'll call B. I know I have trust issues from things that happened earlier in our relationship, so I'm trying to figure out whether this would seem weird to other people too or if my history is affecting how I see it. For some background, there have been 2 situations in the past that affect how I view this. Very early in our relationship, there was a guy I'll call C who had made out with her before we got together. She later went to his house for help with a school project. C did not know she was dating me. I told her I was uncomfortable with her going because they had a history and I thought he might try something. She thought I was overreacting. She stayed there extremely late, and when he was eventually taking her home, he asked her for a kiss. She refused. Nothing happened between them, and I want to be clear about that, but my concern about his intentions wasn't completely unfounded. It also bothered me that she didn't tell him she was in a relationship. Years later, there was a coworker I'll call M. We were at a wedding together, and M was sitting a couple of tables away from us. Instead of speaking in person, they started texting each other things like, "You don't know how to say hi?" Back and forth. There were emojis, teasing, things like, "You're so mean," etc. I felt like they were flirty. She disagreed, but he also didn't know about me. Meanwhile, I was asking my fiancé to dance and take pictures with me and felt like she was spending the night on her phone with him. I later discovered M didn't even know she had a fiancé. Her explanation was that they barely talked at work, so she didn't know when she was supposed to tell him she had a fiancé. That always bothered me because apparently they didn't talk enough for me to ever come up at work, but they were comfortable enough to privately text each other like that. I don't randomly bring C and M up during arguments. My ex feels like I've punished her for those situations for years, while from my perspective, I only bring them up when something current starts happening in a similar way. My concern isn't really, men keep wanting my girlfriend. It's how these situations are handled and whether our relationship is being clearly represented. I feel like she keeps me a secret sometimes. Now to B. B is someone she says she has known since preschool. He works at the place where she gets her oil changed and has worked on her car before. I've actually gone with her to the shop a few times, but she never introduced us. I eventually found out B apparently didn't even notice or see me there. She has always described their interactions at the shop as extremely casual. According to her, they don't really talk. He basically rings her up, works on her car, they might briefly ask how each other is doing, and that's it. We reconciled at the end of May. Then, in June, B started messaging her on Instagram. According to the messages I eventually saw, he initiated the conversations. I don't know whether anything happened before June, but I have no evidence that it did, so I'm only going by what I actually saw. They started sending Instagram reels back and forth and messaging. Some of the reels and messages were jokes about suicide, psychiatric holds, grippy socks, etc. that bothered me separately because my ex had recently gone through a serious mental health crisis and psychiatric hospitalization. She considers that type of humor a coping mechanism and doesn't think there's anything wrong with joking about it with friends. Their conversations weren't explicitly sexual or romantic from what I saw. What made me uncomfortable was the overall dynamic. B sent her multiple good morning messages on different occasions. He'd ask how her day was going, ask how she was staying cool in the heat, send reels, check in with her, etc. There was also a conversation about energy drinks that stood out to me. She drinks Red Bull, and B apparently prefers White Monster. I never personally saw the original conversation where he offered to get her one, so I don't want to claim that I did. Based on the messages I did see, it seems like the Monster conversation must have originally happened at the shop. Later, B messaged her saying that he forgot to get her a Monster, and she responded with something along the lines of, "I should have reminded you." That detail also confused me because she describes their conversations at the shop as extremely quick and insignificant, but apparently they had talked enough in person for him to tell her about the Monster, intend to get one for her, later remember that he had forgotten it, and then continue that conversation privately online. I realize individually none of these things prove anything. Friends absolutely ask about each other's days, say good morning, send memes, and offer to get each other drinks. It was the combination that felt strange to me. Their messages didn't read like two friends casually talking. To me, it felt more like someone being very attentive and trying to build rapport or get closer to someone. What also bothered me was that I didn't even know they were communicating like this. They had been messaging since June, and I didn't find out until much later. She never mentioned that B had suddenly started messaging her. That matters to me because whenever someone new or unexpected starts messaging me, I generally tell my partner. I also naturally talk about my partner a lot. When I eventually found out about B and asked whether he knew about me, she said yes. I asked what she had actually told him about me, and she couldn't remember a specific conversation. Her position was basically that he knew she was in a relationship, I'm on her Instagram, and I'm always at the shop. He later told her he's never seen me at the shop. I had doubts because she simultaneously kept emphasizing how little they actually talked in person. That's when the similarities to M started bothering me. Once again, I was hearing, we barely talk. Our conversations are really quick. He basically just rings me up and works on my car, while simultaneously discovering there was enough familiarity for a private messaging relationship outside of those supposedly brief interactions. I told her I was uncomfortable with the dynamic and that I thought B might like her. She disagreed and said I couldn't know that. She told me she couldn't control someone else's feelings anyway, and that if B ever actually crossed a boundary, she would tell me and handle it. She also felt like I was unfairly bringing C and M into another unrelated situation and basically treating my suspicion as fact because I happened to be right about C years ago. I admittedly became territorial at this point and did something I'm not proud of. Because of the monster conversation, I bought her a white monster myself and asked her to casually mention to B that I had gotten her one so he wouldn't need to. I recognized that I was basically trying to make my presence known and shouldn't have pressured her to do that. She did mention it to him. At some point after all of this, I followed/requested B on Instagram. This is when the situation with my profile happened. B sent a screenshot of my Instagram profile to my ex and asked something along the lines of, "Is this your fiancé?" She said yes. They talked about the fact that I had followed him, and he basically said the only reason he knew it was me was because of posts she had posted with me. My ex then said something essentially like, "It's probably because she said I haven't introduced you." My fault. I didn't know this conversation had happened at the time. Later, on my final day at our old place, things were actually extremely cordial. We ate together, had sex, I showered, we got snacks and ate together, and I was considering spending one final night there. But I couldn't stop thinking about B. So I asked her directly whether B had messaged her again. She said no. I asked if I could see the conversation. She opened Instagram, looked through the messages, and before handing me the phone said something like, "Oh, it was just that." That's when I saw for the first time that B had sent her my profile and asked if I was her fiancé. That opened up several new issues for me at once. First, his reaction made me question even more whether he actually knew who I was before that moment. My ex says he knew about me because I'm on her Instagram and she had previously told him she was in a relationship. My theory, and I fully acknowledge this is only a theory, is that he saw my follow/request, looked at her page, saw posts of us, and that's when he connected everything and realized I was her fiancé. I can't prove that, but him having to send her my profile and specifically ask, "Is this your fiancé?" made it harder for me to believe he had a clear understanding of who I was beforehand. Second, I was really bothered by what she told him about me. There was absolutely no reason, in my opinion, to explain why I followed him. I follow her other friends. If B is simply another friend, why should me following him require an explanation? More importantly, she took a private conflict between us, specifically me being hurt that she had never introduced us, and brought that directly to the person the conflict was about. That felt inappropriate to me and actually reinforced my concern that I couldn't trust her to properly handle the situation. Third, I considered her earlier no about him messaging her a lie. She strongly disagrees. Her explanation is that the conversation involving my profile occurred during the same conversation or day as other messages from B that I already knew existed. B hadn't messaged her again after that conversation ended. Therefore, when I asked, "Has B messaged you again?" she interpreted my question as, "Has he contacted you again since that entire conversation?" and answered no. My interpretation of the question was obviously, has there been any additional communication from B that I don't know about? She has since acknowledged that she didn't bring up the exchange involving my account because she was tired of arguing and believed telling me would cause another argument. That's the part I have the hardest time with. She had repeatedly told me that I needed to trust her judgment and that if anything relevant happened with B, she would tell me. Then B literally messaged her about me. She discussed our private disagreement about him with him, decided not to tell me because she anticipated an argument, and later answered no when I asked whether he'd messaged her. She says she didn't lie, had no bad intentions, wasn't hiding anything, and that if she actually wanted to hide something, she could have simply deleted the messages. She also says I've spent years punishing her for C and M, that she's apologized repeatedly for those situations, that I invalidate her feelings, and that my suspicions don't become facts simply because I feel strongly about them. I agree with her on one major point: I cannot prove B likes her. Maybe he genuinely only wants friendship, maybe good morning texts, checking on her day, and the monster situation are simply how he communicates with friends. And even if he does like her, she can't control someone else's feelings. What I'm struggling with is that I don't think my actual issue is, these 3 men wanted my girlfriend. My issue is what feels like a repeated pattern in how these situations are handled. C didn't know about me. M didn't know about me. And with B, after months of messaging and supposedly already knowing about me, he eventually saw my account and had to specifically ask her whether I was her fiancé. Each time, I've tried to explain what makes me uncomfortable and what I need in terms of transparency and boundaries. She believes she has acknowledged those concerns and that I'm unfairly using old mistakes against her. I feel like similar circumstances keep happening, which is the only reason the old situations become relevant again. We're broken up now, so obviously she is free to remain friends with B, date him someday, reject him, or do whatever she wants. That's no longer my decision. But this situation was basically the final nail in the coffin for me. We had actually discussed remaining friends and even loosely talked about the possibility that maybe we'd both work on ourselves for a year and somehow reconnect later. After everything with B, particularly the message situation and our completely different interpretations of it, I don't want to hold on to that possibility anymore. So I'm genuinely asking, does the B friendship/message dynamic sound normal to you? Would the multiple good morning texts, checking on her day, the monster interaction, etc. make you think someone might be trying to build rapport, or does that sound completely platonic? Would you consider her know about him messaging again a lie or misleading given the context, or do you think her interpretation of again is reasonable? Was it inappropriate for her to tell B about our private disagreement regarding him? And most importantly, am I actually identifying a pattern between these 3 situations, or am I unfairly dragging old relationship problems into an unrelated friendship? I'm completely open to being told where I'm wrong. I'm obviously emotionally invested, and I know that affects my perspective. I just want opinions from people who aren't connected to either of us. She said B knew about me, but he later sent her my Instagram profile and specifically asked if I was her fiancé. She then discussed our private disagreement about B with B himself and chose not to tell me about that exchange because she thought it would cause an argument. When I later asked whether he had messaged her again, she said no because she interpreted again as meaning after that entire conversation, while I meant whether there had been communication I didn't know about. She believes I'm punishing her for old mistakes. I believe I'm identifying a recurring problem with how these situations are handled. I'm trying to understand whether the B situation itself seems inappropriate or whether my past experiences are causing me to read too much into a normal friendship.